For those of you who don't know me, my name's Jürgen. I've grown up in Athens most of my life, and I'd say life's been pretty good for me. I've grown up in a home that loves the Lord and has tried their best to serve Him. I was taught at a young age that we should always do our best to serve the Lord and trust in Him with everything. I accepted the Lord into my heart when I was 8 or 9 years old and was baptized a few years later. Life wasn't too hard at first. I was homeschooled until grade 7, and so the world didn't have much of an influence on me, except for what I saw on TV. But even then, I was pretty sheltered from a lot of things, which I thank my parents for. When I started high school, I wasn't a popular kid, mostly because the way I was trying to live was different from the way everybody else was trying to live. As I got older, near the end of high school, I started getting discouraged and gave in to temptation and simple things. Guys would make bad jokes about girls that were walking by, and I'd join in, or I would sit there and do nothing but smile and laugh, while some kid would be getting verbally abused. I was too nervous to do anything except sit there and laugh along with them, because now the pressure to be cool and to fit in was stronger than ever before, and I let it get the better of me. I associated myself with the wrong people and let my guard down, which affected my life for a short time. Eventually I got through high school and started working full-time with my dad. No longer having the pressure from the people around me to fit in or be cool, I found myself kind of at a standstill. My life wasn't cleaned up by any means, and I hadn't tried to better myself in any way, but at the same time, I wasn't really getting any worse, from what I could tell anyway. I've been very blessed to have had a few really close friends that have sort of helped me through some things over the past couple of years that not a lot of people know about. And with their help and advice, it kind of pushed me to take a serious look at my life and the way I was living. I never talked about what I was going through in life or what I was struggling with anyone except them. And so to the people around me and to my family, I was living a pretty innocent and obedient life, but that was just a lie. While to some, the way I was living might not have seemed very bad or much to worry about, it was slowly suffocating me, and I knew it. So I started praying, and I started asking God for help and really tried to just get through everything on my own, without the help of anyone around me. Then I felt the Lord really put on my heart that it was time to surrender, and it was time to stop hiding these things that were holding me back from living a life fully devoted to Christ. But I needed courage to fully surrender to God because I was nervous and scared to do it. I was scared that once I let people know what I was struggling with, they would judge me for it. But God gave me the courage to go and ask for help and to talk to someone about it. So I went to Pastor Angel and asked him for prayer. I remember telling him that I was done with the life I was living and I was ready to lay everything down, and it was the truth. I was so mentally and emotionally exhausted from holding everything in all the time that I just couldn't take it. So I let him in on what I was going through and told him I'd been struggling with porn for the past year and a half or so. I was sick of it and wanted nothing to do with it. So he sat there and prayed with me that night. And immediately I felt the spiritual battle was won. Now I'm not saying that everything just went away. The temptation is there and it's something that I have to battle with every day. But I'm so grateful because God is right there with me every step of the way. And through him I have strength. I'm also grateful that God is such a forgiving God, and it doesn't matter what I've done. There is nothing that he will not forgive me for. I have no idea where my life would be without God or how my life would have turned out, but I do know that I don't regret a single decision that I made that involved following God and listening to that voice that told me to give up the battle and let God take control. I thank Jesus for what he did in my life, and I proudly proclaim that Jesus is my Savior.
Hello. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Lucas Bond. I've grown up in this church, but really my walk with God started when I was born. I was born with complications, which led to me having 4 surgeries within the first year of my life. And that left me with the inability to control my bowels. And so growing up, going through school, I always had to be careful, keep my distance from people, make sure they couldn't, I could have accidents or stuff like that, and I always had to sort of just keep my distance, not let people know that, think I was a freak. So, yeah, that was tough growing up, always having to watch what I ate, not inviting people over to my house because I couldn't control myself the entire night. Not doing high school sports because I couldn't change in a locker room with everybody else. So it was difficult, and I had to sacrifice a lot for that, but God got me through it, and I'm still struggling with it. God hasn't healed me yet, but hopefully soon. Growing up, I was in a Christian home, 2 Christian parents, whole Christian family, so it was really supportive. We would come to church every Sunday, but I never really had a relationship with God close. I was just sort of come to church every Sunday because that's what we did. Starting high school, I still remained shy and quiet, didn't really talk to a lot of people. And then around the summer of grade 10, Luke Haggett invited me out to youth group for the first time. And so it was like a photo scavenger hunt. I'm all into media and camera work and all that stuff, so I decided to go out, and I never really looked back. I made lots of Christian friends that were my age, but the connection with God still wasn't there. I would go every week, but just to hang out with friends. And in that same year, I also opened up to a lot of going out and meeting new people at high school and going to parties, but I still stuck to my values that I wouldn't drink or do stuff like that, and I knew who I was as a person. The major impact in my life was in grade 12. One of our friends, Josiah Grant, passed away, and that struck all of my friends by surprise, and we were all heartbroken. We all really leaned on each other, and I leaned on God and tried to minister to them a little bit, but it was just a really rough time for everybody. And I've made friendships through that last a lifetime. And so near the end of grade 12, I was all set that I was going to go to Toronto, go to film school. I'd visited the school. I had already had half the essay done. And then one Sunday, Pastor Angel calls all the youth up to the front. And so I go up because that's what everybody else does, and I just keep my head down, trying to avoid eye contact with him. And I look up, and he looks me dead in the eye. I'm like, oh. And he's like, and he points right at me, and I remember him saying, "Are you sure you're not supposed to be going into ministry?" And I just instant tears and just crying. And that was at the beginning of the service, so I went back to the pew and just sat in silence and prayed, and I felt God saying that I wasn't supposed to go to school. So that was tough. And so I stopped immediately, didn't further going into school at all, and just sort of sat most of the summer because I didn't have a job or anything. And 2 weeks before summer ended, my uncle calls me up and says, "Do you want Monday to Friday at home hardware?" I'm like, "Sure." So I know that came from God because I wasn't sure what I was going to do. And over the past 2 years, it's been a real test of faith that I've just tried to just stay with God and just listen to what he's been telling me. And I've been helping out with the senior youth, lots of mentoring from Pastor Angel over the past year with carrying on from college and careers. And what God has placed in front of me for the future is that this summer I'll be interning at Chapel Ridge with Luke Haggett. And so that's a really exciting experience. And I know going forward that just to continue trusting in God, and I trust him with my whole future.
Good job. You see, Jurgen, you never know. Okay. Pardon? Clayton's here. Okay, good. Where is he? Come on down. This is not the Price is Right. This is the life that's right.
It's a lot different when there's full here. Those who don't know me, my name is Clayton Campbell. I didn't grow up around here. I actually grew up in White Lake, which is a little town very up north. Middle of 5 kids. Grew up in a Christian home as most of these other guys have. Went to church every week. More about religion, but a little less about relationship with God. My parents told me that, I didn't remember it, but my parents told me, I think it was around 3 or 4, I accepted Jesus as my Savior. My older brothers, I have 2 older brothers, they had asked, and I wanted to be with them, and I wanted to accept Jesus, so I did. It wasn't until I went to Bonashire Baptist Camp, which is, again, up north, that I accepted Jesus as my Savior and rededicated my life to God. I was able to resist temptation and grow as a Christian in those about 4 or 5 years. I got a job and was able to work mostly every weekend, and so I stopped going to church. About that same time, I got my first computer, and I also got caught in the world of pornography and sexual sin. I couldn't find a way out. I was too embarrassed. I was too embarrassed to ask for help. I made a decision about 15 or 16 after I was sexually abused by a friend that lived with us at my parents' house, that I was done. I wanted to rebel, and I wanted to get out. I hid it from everybody, and I was really into shame, guilt, anger, and depression and fear, and it plagued my high school years. I had a rough time. I had bad relationships, but eventually I went to university, but I still didn't ask for help. I still didn't talk to God, and I still didn't go to church. I felt distant from God, but I filled my heart with other stuff, with more pleasures that did not help. Eventually, this led me to a place where I lost everything. I lost my place to live, my job, and I had a fiance that I lost as well. I came to feel that God's presence at once in this darkest place. I knew the meaning of true fear. I had no plan, and for me as an organizer, I really needed a plan. This was big. But God took it all away. He relieved the burden, and with a fully committed heart, He gave it all back. My favorite verse as a kid was Joshua 1:9. Have I not commanded you, be strong and courageous. Do not be terrified. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. I came to a realization that God was with me even though I was in these dark places. And that even though I would end up in these dark places, that I could eventually get over them with His power. So what I needed was a restart in life. A reboot to my entire life. I was able to eventually move down to Athens, where Jurgen's from, and restart my life, and it came up with helps from Tom and Penny, the Evanses. They invited me, I started coming to FMC, to the Free Methodist Church here, and I made some good friends like Roman, Jurgen, Sheldon, and a few others. And God isn't done with me yet. I still struggle, but have received a lot of support from people like Tom in the college careers class, from Pastor Angel. I don't know, and like Lucas, I don't really know where I'm going, but I best leave that to the people that know what's going on. I thank God that I'm alive today, and that He is alive as well.
This is Aaron Nomile.
All right, as Pastor Angel said, my name is Aaron, and this is my personal testimony. It's the first time I've ever done this, honestly. When Pastor Angel asked me to do it, I was like, sure, I'll go on Google, I'll find something for you. But then he's like, no, you do it. I'm like, oh, that could be an issue. To be honest, I've never really thought of my life as a personal testimony. I knew my life had a meaning, a story, a purpose behind it, maybe someone to find some inspiration over, but never really thought of it as a testimony. As a kid, I've always grown up in the church. My parents, they were Christians. My dad, he was a pastor. God's always been a big thing in our family and our home. And I remember early on, church for me was all cookies and juice. You went to Sunday school, heard stories about people in the Bible who lived long ago. God was up in the sky. Everything was great. Just give me my cookie. So that was church for me. Lasted like that for a few years. We moved to a different church where Dad became pastor at. And from there, I got to experience what my first views of church was. And my views on church was I saw a lot of people in an act, almost like a silent audience. They'd clap their hands, they'd clap their hands, they'd raise up, they'd do the amens, all that stuff whenever they're given the keywords. But that was about it. It was a once-a-week diet. After that, we moved from that church and we came up to Perth. And I was about 10 or 11 years old at the time. I never really made any friends, and the first thing I found there were people my own age. That took me by surprise. So there were so many. There was like hundreds of them everywhere. So I quickly became friends with the other pastors' kids. We moved up to that church. Dad became the pastor there. Everything seemed great. The whole time I really didn't do much about God. He was a guy that you heard about once a week, lived up in the sky. You heard all these cool stories about him. That was really about it I thought of him. I remember there was a Sunday school teacher who unfortunately passed away, and she told me that God was kind of like a friend you could go to all the time. So I thought about it, say, God's like one of those people that, once a week, you're going through something, you keep him to the side, say, you know what, I'm going through something. You can talk to me, tell me what to do. It's okay, you can go away for the rest of the week. I have my other friends here, I'll go talk to them. So that was me and God. God was once a week. I didn't really look in the Bible much. I knew enough to tell you basic answers for Sunday school, but that was really it. I could care less about the Bible. But then I found something about my friends. I remember I was hanging out at their place one time, and I came upstairs to see where they all went to. Before I walked into the kitchen, I stood there and I listened, and what I heard was, why do we hang out with him? Why do we spend our time with him? He is a loser, he is a wimp, he is a loner, he does nothing, he stays at home and does homeschooling. Why, Mom, do you make us spend time with him? My best friends are talking about me. And their mom turned to them and said, think of it this way. Jesus spent time with the lowest of the lowest, the people no one wanted to be with. What would Jesus do? I was a charity work to them. I wasn't really their friend, and they really weren't mine. I snuck back downstairs while they still talked about all the things they hated about me, the time they spent with me, and how I was the worst person to hang out with because I was homeschooled and I was a loner and all this other stuff. I sat down in the basement and I thought to myself, do I tell them that I know? Or do I go on pretending? They came downstairs. I pretended I didn't even know that happened. I went home and I made a decision. If they're going to treat me this way, I'm getting back at them. So I purposely set out to make life miserable for them every time they spent with me. I would purposely beat them at every game that I knew they loved to win, just to rub it in a little bit secretly. The whole time I never even thought about God through this, on what would God do? Didn't think much about it. The whole time, though, most people would have gone to their dad, to their mom, someone that they could have gone to talk about it, but at that time I couldn't, because I hated my dad. And he hated me. At least that's the way I thought it was. We were always at each other, yelling, screaming. It would be nothing for us to be sitting at the table and just rip each other apart, to the point our voices were so strained you couldn't even utter another word. My dad and me were enemies. And there was always just that thought in the back of your head, just wait till you're big enough, wait till you're old enough, and you can put him down. So I was alone. I had these fake friends who hated me, who didn't even want to spend time with me. And I pretended that I didn't know just so that I could have friends, so I could feel like I actually belonged, because the biggest fear to me, you're alone. You have no one. It was about a year or so that went on like that, and then we did leave that church, but we stayed in the area. I remember the one time, actually the only time, I actually did lose it on my friends. We were playing a game of grounders, and they accused me of cheating, lying, and I got very angry at them. And I have a lot of anger issues that basically I get mad. Think of it as the Incredible Hulk. Bigger, stronger, it just builds up, and finally it breaks out. I lost it on my friends, and the one that tormented me the most, I threw him off a playset, and he just laid on the ground. His brothers went and grabbed me. I threw him off like they were little rag dolls. I watched as they laid on the ground in pain. Came down, pulled them over, told them I knew everything, and I just left them. Part of me was just waiting for that phone call from their parents about everything. It never came. Instead, they moved away. And I really was alone again. So I went on, hurt, angry, still alone. Me and my dad, we still weren't on the greatest grounds. Then we came to this church here in Smith Falls, and I didn't let anyone in. People wanted to be my friends. People wanted to talk to me, get to know me. It's like, that's good for you, but you're not getting in. I've been hurt before. People, they just get in, they lie to you, and that's how I thought of it. This whole time, God, he was just a thought in the back of my mind. He was just with that dusty old Bible that I didn't even read. I could care less about God, because if God's so great, why would he take me to this place where these people would hurt me and make my life miserable? God's supposed to care about you, so why is he doing this? At the time, I didn't realize it, but he was getting me ready for something even worse that was coming. So while we're at Smith Falls here, still not letting anyone in, I actually did end up meeting someone, though. Someone who, for the first time in 2 years, maybe more, that actually led into my life for the first time. Me and this girl have been talking, and we got close. We became good friends. Soon I let her in, and she let me into her life. We both found that each other was hurting. We tried to be there for each other, but it was too much, moving too fast. We were given too many freedoms, and some things got mistaken, and she disappeared. And I was alone again, and I was hurt again, because I felt rejected, alone. I got even more angry. It got to the point that my little sister Cassidy, who adores me, she would ask me, "How are you doing today, big brother?" And I would blow up at her and rip her apart as if she asked me, "What is your problem?" Thankfully, though, my dad and me, we had begun to rebuild our relationship. We got back to a point where we could be in the same room without yelling at each other. And we kept working on it. And now me and my dad have a better relationship. But during that whole time, I still blamed God. I didn't think about him. I could care less what he does in life. Just leave me alone. I remember I'd go out for walks, hours on end, just yelling at God, shouting. I didn't care who heard. It was all God's fault. That's what I kept telling myself. It was God's fault. He's the reason for all of this. But then there was that little voice in the back of your head, just almost like a little whisper. It just said, "Do you trust me?" One time I actually sat down and I just listened and said, "Do you trust me? Why am I going to trust you when you've hurt me this way? Do you trust me?" Over and over again I heard that. And eventually I got so broken down and said, "You know what? I've tried everything else. Yeah, sure, I trust you." Next thing I heard was, "Give up on her. Move on in life." I asked him why. "Do you trust me?" So I did what he said. And suddenly it was like a big weight was actually lifted right off my back, and I felt like I could breathe for the first time ever. I came back to church a couple days later, and I saw all those people who wanted to be my friend, and I actually let them. I actually slowly started to reach out, put myself out there more than anything for a friend. And I actually became great friends with a lot of people. And I realized that it wasn't necessarily God making life miserable for me, that everything happened. I forgave God and I forgave the people. And I've slowly started, I still am starting, to come back to where I should have been. So that was really the big thing in my life. I was hurt, I was rejected, and I felt no one wanted me, and I blocked everyone out. Then God kept talking to me the whole time, and was actually the one person who was there for me all the time that I could go to. I was so angry at him, I didn't see it, and I almost missed it all, and I'm thankful that I didn't. And I kept thinking back to this thing that Dad's always told me, is that we need to have a relationship with God and not a religion. At the time, I didn't understand it. Now I know exactly what he means. So basically, to recap, I'm a pastor's kid. I was hurt by a church. I was hurt by the people closest to me. I blamed God for a long time. But now I know it wasn't God. I know it was the people who did it, but it wasn't God. And that God was always there for me. And I'm working every day to get back to the relationship I should have been in the first place with God. So that's my testimony.